Sawadee. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dipen Mehta, and I look after the financial services business at Microsoft here in the region. And I'm honored to be here and delighted to talk through this exciting space of generative AI, and more importantly, in the context of this room, its impact on financial services. I've had the pleasure of working in financial services for over 15 years on, if you like, on that side of the table. And then in the past few years, I've been working in big tech firms and being exposed to emerging technologies and how it can actually change the way we think about financial services and its impact to both the internal processes of, let's say, a bank, but also our customer experience. And generative AI is this new hyped technology in many ways that's going to be more than impactful to financial services, and I'll talk through that in a moment. And so what I'd like to get through in the next 20 minutes with you this morning is three key kind of topics. First is I want to define this concept of generative AI, or Gen AI, and what it actually means vis-a-vis other forms of AI and other emerging technologies, and maybe demystify the hype a bit. Then, as I'm standing here on the stage of the BOT, like any new technology, I want to talk a little bit about the risks associated with this technology and its impact, again, in financial services and in regulated entities. And then I'll spend some time going through where we're seeing this being used already, so the early adopters of this technology, and really ultimately how you all in this room and your organizations can start taking care and investing in this kind of technology. So generative AI is a very much hyped term at the moment. It's very exciting. But in fact, it's not a breakthrough new technology, like everyone thinks. In fact, it's just an evolution of huge amounts of investment in this term of AI. And so when we talk about AI or artificial intelligence, what we're really talking about is this notion of training a computer to think in many ways like a human. And the ultimate goal of AI, and it's an umbrella term that was popularized in the 60s, is about ultimately achieving this kind of intelligence from machines that mimic a human. Now, we're not there yet. That would be, we've all watched the movies, it could be a Terminator-type environment. We're not there yet, so luckily. But what we have done is we've made some big advances in this space. And the first advancement was in machine learning. And this is the idea of taking a lot of structured data and then having the computer compute a specific outcome, a very narrow outcome, like a risk score or a risk outcome. From there, we made some more advancements, in particular in this area known as deep learning. And this is where we started looking at unstructured data, like pictures, videos, and actually be able to create kind of insights into that like a human would with their eyes. So computer vision is a really good example of deep learning. And then as of the last few years, we've made even more advancements of really kind of almost combining these two things. So taking very vast amount of structured data and unstructured data. In fact, these models in the generative AI space have been trained on years, decades of human-created content. So this corpus of information has been trained on has actually been kind of contributed by everyone in this room, if you've participated on the internet at some point in time, which I think everyone has. So in fact, everyone here has been part of the training of these models. And so this idea of a pre-trained model, and you've heard of ChatGPT or GPT, the P stands for pre-trained. It's been trained on a huge amount of data. And what that allows us to do is have these things called, or the term of a foundational model, which allows everyone to kind of consume the beauty of all of this training. Now, it's very, very expensive. As our hosts had mentioned, Microsoft has invested double-digit billions of dollars into the OpenAI Foundation. We're partners with OpenAI in building things like GPT and ChatGPT. It takes an enormous amount of computing power. And the thing that's really shifted and changed in today's world is that we've opened all of that training, all of that work, all of that heavy, heavy compute power that was required to do this in a generalized way for everyone to consume. And that's ultimately the big shift in what we're talking about with Gen AI, is that it's now accessible, this pre-trained model is accessible to everyone to then consume and use in different applications and different experiences with their customers. As you can see here, one of the things you're seeing is that over time we've been investing. This isn't new. It's just new that it's been popularized and opened up to the public, but it's been going on for many, many years. And we're seeing now that people are training with more and more and more data, trillions and trillions of data points. And we're at the point now of law of a bit of diminishing returns. So there's always a question, is now the time to look at this technology? And the answer is yes. There will be some more advancements, but it's not going to be a step change anymore. We are now ready to start consuming this technology and applying it both internally from our business processes and obviously from a customer experience perspective for your outbound customers. One key takeaway I'm hoping everyone in this room will get from this presentation is where we think Gen AI should be positioned. Gen AI is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all your problems. You can't just deploy it and change all your customer experiences and lower your operating costs and get all the benefits. It's actually quite a lot of work, and on its own is not that useful. So we talked about these things like machine learning, very narrow outcomes, very specific outcomes, risk scoring, VAR, whatever it may be, analytics. We need to marry those narrow or traditional AIs with Gen AI. That's how we see the future. It's not going to be just having a chat interface, but it's going to be a chat interface that can then call an internal risk model to then compute what it needs to do next. And I'll talk a bit about in a few minutes around the various different aspects of this technology and how it can be used in terms of use cases. But you'll see that there's no narrow use case of Gen AI that can solve an outcome by itself. So as I said, standing here on the stage of the BOT, I want to talk a little bit about the risks associated with this technology. There's been many, many headlines around ChatGPT, GPT, all these Gen AI capabilities. And yes, some of it is warranted, and some of it is a bit extra kind of overhyped. But what's important is that this technology generates enormous amounts of opportunity for us as organizations to both lower the operating expenditure of our own businesses, but also to change that customer experience. And a really key one here is around personalization. We've talked for years in this industry around personalization, hyper-personalization. We now have the technology with Gen AI to do that in almost real time. Gen AI can read across various sources of information and then summarize in seconds what a human would take a very long time to kind of decipher and determine. And so there's a huge opportunity around personalization. The same respect, you think about chatbots and a lot of the operating costs or processes within the organization that are very manual. This technology can then again be applied to really start driving that operational efficiency. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that really means. It's not about getting rid of roles and jobs, but it will be about taking away some mundane tasks that many of our organization and employees don't want to do anyway, and allowing them then to focus on some higher value activities. But like any new technology with all these opportunities, they present massive amount of risks, in particular with bad actors, as we would call them. And first and foremost, around social engineering. We all understand phishing. It's prevalent in financial services. It's currently a lot of work to create these phishing attacks. Unfortunately, with Gen AI, again, in seconds, it can process a huge amounts of data around all of us and then generate some very sophisticated phishing attacks. So social engineering is a massive area of concern for the industry. As we know, post-COVID, fraud is at an all-time high, particularly in Southeast Asia, even more so in Thailand itself. If the bankers in the room, we all know. This technology is going to allow that to occur way, way faster, unfortunately, right? And so we have to think about how we're going to manage these risks. So there's a number of areas that we see different risks. I won't have the time to dive deep into each of these. But as I talked about kind of this sophisticated phishing and fraud, this idea that because it's trained on everything that we've created as a community, those same biases that we have. Now, biases don't always mean bad things. Biases just mean preferences. We might have a subconscious or a conscious bias for something, a preference for something, and these models then mimic us. It's not rocket science. It was trained on everything we've created, and therefore it thinks a little bit like we do. And so thinking through how we're going to manage those biases is really important. And then lastly, when you think about copyright, some of the content that has been trained on, maybe it was published by your organization, maybe it's copyrighted. This is a gray area, but something that we do need to think about when we want to govern this technology. So we see sort of 5 broad areas, but I will just touch on 1 or 2 of these. Obviously, we have this notion of responsible AI, the ability to start governing this technology. This isn't about governments and regulators, no offense to the BOT, regulating and governing this technology. It's actually about all of us as a community need to govern this technology because it was actually trained by us, interestingly enough. So we need to come together as a community around this notion of responsible AI and actually start building frameworks and communities to start governing this technology. And at Microsoft, we have our approach. It's known as responsible AI. And what we've done with our partnership with the OpenAI Foundation is we've taken those models and we've actually wrapped them in a framework. So as you consume ChatGPT on Azure, or Microsoft Azure OpenAI, or any of the models, large language models or Gen AI models, we have an ability to allow organizations to start putting guardrails in place, electing people to be kind of internal governors of the data, managing the biases, and ultimately creating reports and scorecards of how we think the model is performing or answering questions within your organization. And one of the key things here is about this traceability and explainability. Every response that comes from the large language model or the Gen AI model, if you've used Bing or search engine or Bing Chat, you'll see at the bottom that it gives you a reference. So you can now explain where did they get the answer? Where did this Gen AI generate the answer from? So it's no longer just kind of a black box and being very opaque. It allows you then to have that explainability, particularly in your own organization, and then in a regulated entity to provide that visibility back to the regulators of what you're producing. So, lots of opportunity, really cool technology, lots of risks. Where do we go from here? And so where are we seeing early adopters in financial services really using this technology? So at a very high level, we sort of see that the base cases, if you'd like, of this technology are across these 6 areas. You've probably all used ChatGPT. In fact, I think some of the language used by the hosts today have been generated using ChatGPT, right? Very useful use case. So reading, composing, answering questions. So we have ChatGPT. You can ask it a question and it gives you a good answer. Think about that use case internally for knowledge management and things of that nature. And then new content generation. This is an area that is being explored quite heavily by some of the kind of very advanced thinkers in this space. But think about hyper-personalization. This ability to, as you're managing your leads and reaching out for cross-sell or upsell or just net new customer acquisition, to create specific emails, messages, texts, line message, whatever it may be, that are hyper-personalized and generated based on the interactions that customers had with you or other buying patterns or other sources of information. And what's really interesting about this is because we've been doing this now for many months, we can actually identify where this technology is going to start driving change. Every organization's focused on better ROE, lowering their ROI on investments. We now have gotten enough data, we can understand, in particular, where you're applying these technologies, how you can start lowering the cost of operations or actually driving some kind of top-line revenue growth. So when we think about where we're seeing financial institutions really kind of leveraging this technology, we see it across kind of 3 broad buckets, and I'll spend some time on this slide. First is around automation. Because this technology can reason like a human, like a reasonably educated human, it can do a lot of the tasks that are done with kind of our back office. And so this idea of automating a number of processes that might be manual, there might be disparate sources of information. This technology can read across multiple sources and then give you summaries, link to data, actually give you insights that even as the creators of the technology don't really know how it came up with some of these answers, right? And so this ability to start automating a bunch of processes within your organization is the low-hanging fruit. The area where we're spending most of our time currently is in this idea of augmentation. So you may have seen some videos and some kind of media attention around Microsoft's kind of branding known as Copilot. And it's an important word that we've chosen for a specific reason. We don't believe this technology is ever going to replace humans. We fully expect that humans will always be involved in the processes. But if we can create a co-pilot, just like when you're flying, you have the captain and you have a co-pilot, it's there to help take some of the burden away from the individual and then augment their capabilities. And so you'll see this across many different things. You'll see this across Microsoft products. You'll see this across internal processes. A very popular use case at the moment is this concept of an RM co-pilot. So we're seeing a number of organizations, and I'll show a couple of examples in a moment, that are looking at how they can augment the RM with this type of technology. How do you allow the RM to know everything about the customer in seconds, kind of a customer 360, so that they can have a very personalized or hyper-personalized conversation to both service the customer and give that kind of customer delight, but also then the opportunity for cross-sell and upsell. And then the last piece, which is sort of related to this, is about extending this technology out from within your four walls. We're calling it kind of delight, right? So this is really focused on the customer experience. How can we use this technology to start providing better customer experiences and differentiated customer experiences such that you're getting real value in a sense, or inherent value to your customer experience. And so lots of things we talked about, kind of lead generation a moment ago, very customized messaging to your customer. You can not only just text anymore, you can actually even create formats of the email in real time. Different banners, different imagery, maybe even video content now that's hyper-personalized to one person. We all have chatbots, right? We've all interacted with chatbots. The concept of a very static chatbot, where you ask it something and then it gives you a response, or like me or maybe many of you in the room, as soon as I load the chatbot, I say live operator and try to get to a human as fast as possible. With this technology, I actually can have a reasonably good conversation. It's no longer just about my intent. It's reasoning over what I said and then trying to direct me appropriately. And so it's quite a very powerful kind of change in the way we think about customer servicing. Even in the contact center on the back end, while it may be still within your four walls, the ability to have your contact center staff bubble up all this information, summarize everything. Maybe someone went into a branch, had a bad experience. They had a fraud transaction recently. They lost their card, or the ATM had an issue with an ATM. All of this information can be bubbled up in seconds. So when someone calls into the call center, they're immediately say, hello, sir, we realize you had this problem. How can I help you, right? Or how can I make it better? Without the customer actually talking and kind of going through the motions of elaborating on what the problem was. I talked about wealth management. I won't spend time on this, just given how much time we have. But many organizations, in particular in this example, wealth management, are investing heavily in this technology. We're seeing many banks, including banks here in Thailand, looking at it from a contact center perspective. Its ability in Thai is reasonably good. It's obviously very good in English. It's about 90-some-odd% fluent in Thai. Better than me, certainly. But what I wanted to just talk about for a second is this. This technology, for the first time, it's a technology that actually can be impactful across the entire customer journey, the entire life cycle of our customers. From lead generation, onboarding, risk management, product definition, product servicing, customer servicing, all the way through the life cycle. Right? And so this is just an example of some of the use cases that we're seeing customers invest in. But it's still very early days, and so this slide will continue to get updated. The idea here is you can start thinking about how you want to think of your customer experience from the moment you've touched them for the first time, all the way through servicing them over years and years and years. The way we've kind of, over the past few months, the way we've really started thinking about Gen AI with our customers is kind of broken apart into two things, or two kind of domains. First is what we're calling kind of horizontal AI, right, or productivity-focused Gen AI. And this is this concept, for example, Copilot that Microsoft's built. This is the idea that we're going to integrate all of this technology into the products you already use. Office, Teams. Some of you may have played with Teams and seen this technology already. We're going to embed this across every product that Microsoft develops, but also we've created a framework to allow others to use that Copilot to integrate into their own applications. So as you buy some vendor application, they may have a Copilot integrated. So you get productivity for free in that sense. The other side is this vertical side. And this is where we're spending an enormous amount of time working with customers to try to identify which use cases can you personally customize that's a business process or specific to your organization to allow yourselves to then build a new differentiated experience or a differentiated outcome using the technology. I've got only a few seconds left, so we talked a bit about this, but just want to summarize with where we think you should get started. Gen AI is not about very specific outcomes. Again, that's where traditional AI or machine learning or narrow AI is being called, is useful. But when you think about summarization, doing things that humans would do using their cognitive brain, reasoning, summarization, reading, these are great use cases to get started. And then as you pair this technology with more narrow AI, you will actually get an outcome that's quite useful. So I'll leave with this last slide. Everything I've talked about here has been very much around the technology and this new algorithms and this new AI. But actually, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real value proposition is how your organization can absorb this technology. How do you upskill the people to take advantage of it? How do you dispel the myths that it's going to take their jobs away? It's not. In fact, it's going to empower them to do more and get better outcomes for you and your customers. And it's about that cultural change that has to be embedded in the organization to allow this technology to be useful. So with that, thank you very much. If it was useful, Governor Cap.